and every story can change the world.
Together we are Global Speakers Talk.
Hey folks, I'm here today to talk to you about resilience. I don't believe that what we know of resilience, what we talk about resilience, I don't believe it's the right way of doing it at all. I don't believe it's the ability to bounce back. I don't believe it's the ability to stay strong in the face of adversity. Had I followed that mainstream version of resilience, I wouldn't be sat here now. I literally would be dead. Blunt, but true. I'm going to tell you today a little about my background, a couple of challenges that I faced, what led me to that belief ultimately, and what I did about it. What I'd like you to take away from this is I have a problem-solving process that I've developed over a period of time that I have literally learned to articulate only in the last couple of years as a result of these speaking opportunities, because my aim in all this is to motivate and inspire people to adapt to life's challenges, to learn resilience and become accustomed to the idea that we develop it throughout our life. You know, it's not something that just sits in the background, does nothing, you know, and we only have to look at it when it goes wrong. Resilience is something we continually titivate and maintain. I want to tell you about, like I said, my challenges, how I dealt with them, and hopefully help you with yours. So the slogan I use for my business is to get MIA'd, get motivated, get inspired, get adapted. And if you struggle with any of those, then, well, you come and see me. But with the aim of providing the context then, so a few years ago, I was medically discharged from the British Army. When you've been in the service for over 2 decades like I had, it is not something you just walk away from and get on with the rest of your life. You can't. Your world has just unraveled. The military was a way of life. It provided purpose, direction, structure, and in what felt like the blink of an eye, it was gone. And I struggled with that. I struggled a lot with that. It didn't happen clean. It wasn't on my own terms. It came with multiple injuries, PTSD, and the mental battle that I dealt with afterwards, especially in the first few months afterwards, was almost intolerable. Thanks to an array of veterans charities, I was able to find a way forward again. I got a connection into something called the Invictus Games, and that provided me with the opportunity of a lifetime, literally. For those not familiar with the Invictus Games, if you imagine an event very much like the Paralympics, a multi-day, multi-sport event that takes place periodically every sort of 1-2 years or so in different countries around the world. Okay. Now, the purpose of the Invictus Games is to support serving and ex-serving personnel who have found themselves on something called the WIS list, the Wounded, Injured and or Sick list. It's a list that, let me tell you, nobody joins the services to be on. And ultimately, back to my own story, ultimately that is where I found myself. And I've got a huge background in fitness. I was an instructor, fitness instructor in the military as well. So to find myself on that list, you know, it's soul destroying. So the Invictus Games gave me purpose again. It gave me a way forward again. It gave me the training, gave me recovery. It wasn't just about the competition or sports. It was a way of finding that way forward again. So and I was rebuilding. However, bear in mind we'd been going about 6 months, 7 months at this point. 3 months before the games, it all unraveled again, quite suddenly. I found myself getting seriously ill very quickly, and my body, which I thought I knew really well, obviously having lived in it for 40 years, it became unpredictable. Like all of a sudden, I was hemorrhaging body weight. I lost over a quarter of my body weight in 2 weeks, and ultimately the rate at which I was losing body weight was the reason that led me to the doctors. And they made no bones about the fact that it was Friday the 19th of May, almost 3 years to the day, almost. The doctors made no bones about the fact that had I not come in when I did, I would not have survived the weekend. I had something called diabetic ketoacidosis, and my body was essentially eating itself from the inside out. And I essentially was a type 1 diabetic. My pancreas had stopped producing insulin, and everything literally changed overnight when I got that diagnosis. So it was a blur immediately walking out of the hospital. I remember walking out with 2 big shopping bags full of medical stuff, and after that, it was just a bit surreal. It wasn't until the next morning, after I had my first good night's sleep in over 2 weeks, I felt like $1,000,000, even though I was still hanging out my ass, literally. And I literally just snapped into my process. Now, like I said, I've only learned to articulate this in the last couple of years, but it's something that I developed over my career, problem-solving process that I absolutely believe can be applied to any challenge at all. But there is 3 key ingredients that we need to embrace for it to work. The first and the most critical is perception, how we see the world around us. Okay, if there was experiments done a number of years ago, I think it started with something called the Lasada line, where they looked at how many good things were needed to outweigh a bad thing. Okay, a bad event, a bad activity, and it was initially calculated at 3. Slightly more precise numbers were used, but let's just say 3. It was then more recently recalculated by another team of scientists, and they reckon that it's 5 is the actual number. 5 positive things are needed in order to outweigh a bad thing. That, in my opinion, is why it can be really difficult, really challenging for people to see a way forward when shit hits the fan. Okay, hard to see the good for the bad, and ultimately that's where perception is incredibly important. That mindset where you see something going wrong in your life and you can look around and see opportunities as a result of it. It is difficult to do, it really is, but that is absolutely critical, the ability to see the good for the bad. And it may need to be a deliberate action if it's something we're not used to doing, and it might be that we need to get help to do it as well, but it is absolutely integral. And the second key ingredient is humility, recognizing that we're not perfect. We're human. It's part of being human. We're not perfect. Mistakes do not make us less human. They do not make us failures. They are opportunities. And this goes back to the point of perception. We need to see mistakes as opportunities and a way to learn, to gain feedback, and so on. And then the third key ingredient is the ability to invest consistently. And I'm not talking about breaking out your credit card. I'm not talking about blowing your bank balance. I'm talking about the investment of your energy and your focus over time. Consistent investment of your energy and focus over time. And we are talking about applying yourself for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes a day on something, a subject, a topic, something new, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you imagine doing that every day for a period of time, imagine how much that can build up over time. Okay, the byproducts are money, the byproducts are performance. They're not the initial investment. It's your energy, your focus, and what you choose to focus it on, and how much time you apply that over consistently. So bear in mind those 3 key ingredients. I came down after getting my first good night's sleep in 2 weeks, still hanging out my ass, even though I felt great, and I snapped into my process. And the first step is first of 5 steps is literally keep it so do something simple. Sorry. And for me, it was to go and make a brew, a cup of coffee. Literally put some water in the kettle, click the button, put the granules in the cup, in goes the water, done. Simple as that. When shit hits the fan, when a problem comes out of the woodwork and hits us like a ton of bricks, especially those life-changing problems, it is very easy to become overwhelmed. But let's be clear, the path to a resolution starts by you getting on it. Okay, just take a step forward, do a simple action. Take a breath, get some water, go for a walk, do some fizz, a couple of press-ups, whatever. Something simple you don't need to think about. The second step is keep it simple. I prefer to say give it a kiss, just because it sounds better and lightens the mood, But I'm sure most people will have heard the acronym keep it super simple, KISS. Now, for me at that time, I literally turned around after making my brew, got to my table, laid out all that medical bump that I'd picked up the day before, those 2 shopping bags full of stuff. And I'd looked at what I needed to do next, not what I wanted to do, not what I'd like to do, not what I imagined myself doing, but what I needed to do. And that was to do my blood test, work out my insulin needs and so on, and move forward with it one step at a time. What I needed to do next and next and next and so on. And that's how I worked through it. The third step is understanding. I don't believe in a perfect plan. When shit hits the fan, a perfect plan, I don't believe it will help the situation. More to the point, in that particular situation I was in, it wasn't going to help at all. Not only that, it would kill me if I didn't respond appropriately, literally. I believe a reasonable plan is enough to weather the chaos. And I only need a level of understanding to achieve that. So by keeping it simple, doing what I needed to do and then what I needed to do next and so on, I was able to get that level of understanding. But then by continually moving through that process, I can then apply layer upon layer of understanding, ultimately compounding that consistent investment of learning that I've been doing. The fourth step is to embrace the change and the inevitable mistakes. Fighting change is only going to make the situation worse. Change is a part of life. It's inevitable. And in this situation, it would have killed me if I hadn't gone with it. Mistakes also come as well, as we've already mentioned. Embrace them, move forward, treat them as an opportunity to learn. As I've said, it comes down to perception. The last step is to learn, adapt, and repeat again and again and again. With the next step, with the next step, with the next step. It's as simple as that. For me, in that moment, after going through all those steps, still sat there at that kitchen table with a brew in hand, I had what I can only describe as an epiphany. And this is the fall down point I think a lot of people have when challenges hit, is they fail to see a goal, a way forward, something that keeps them keeps them driving forward during that adversity. For me, I looked at that table, I stood there with the brew in hand, looking at this table full of medical stuff, recognizing the level of the challenge I had, all the difficulty that was going to come with it. Because I'd gone through the steps, I'd got my level of understanding, and I looked at all this stuff and I realized that if I was going to go against medical advice, if I was going to keep going on the process to the Invictus Games, which were in 3 months' time, it was going to hurt so much more than anything I'd ever come across before. This was going to be the most significant challenge I've ever faced. So the significance of my goal had to match the scale of the challenge. And that was the moment where I said to myself, if I'm going to keep going, it's got to be a gold medal or I'm not going at all. It's that simple. To put that in perspective, I was doing 4 blood tests a day, 4 needle pricks every day, 5 insulin injections every day when I started, like any type 1 diabetic. Within a week, that had doubled. By the second week, it had doubled again. 5 weeks later, I was jabbing myself more than 40 times a day. That was why I needed that goal, to keep me focused through that difficulty. Roll the clock forward, and I got to the Invictus Games. By following that process, every time I came across those little challenges, if I didn't have that goal, I would have struggled. But I was stood there on that podium, and I got the gold medal around my neck. And it wasn't because the path got easier. It was not because I refused to get off the path. It's because I chose to carve my own path and drive it forward. And that is ultimately the message I want to leave with you today. That 5-step process, do something simple, keep it simple, develop your level of understanding, only what you need to understand to move forward one step at a time, embrace the change and the inevitable mistakes, then learn, adapt, and repeat again and again and again. I absolutely believe this is enough to weather any storm. And I promise you will succeed off the other side of it. Thank you.
Together we are global speakers talk.